Okay, so as you know, this week's Parsha is Parshas Tetzaveh, and it's a direct connect to Parshas Truma from the week before. So we started off learning that about the Tzimtzum. Before the Bria, there was three things missing, as we know, which basically make up Olam Hazeh, and one it's the end of the Mishnah Sefer Yetzirah, the Sfar, Saper, Sipur, the three Lashonos of Sefer, and one of the Taichim, except the Taichis, that's referring to B'li Makom, B'li Zman, and B'li Mispar. That's how it's learned. So these are all the things we have no understanding of it. What does it mean? No space, doesn't take up space. What does it mean? It doesn't take up any time. We can't understand what it means to be without time, and we can't understand what it means to have no number two. Right? It was only a one. It was Hashem Echad U'Shmo Echad, nothing else. So there was a thing called the Tzimtzum. The Tzimtzum took place before the Bria. Then came what happened by the Bria. What's the first thing that happened by the Bria? First thing that happened by the Bria was Makom Panui, and then in the Makom Panui we made a. That's where the Olam was created, in the Makom Panui. Now, one of the tikkunim, and we're learning about a tikkun, and our whole life is dedicated, is to make a tikkun of Hayalma for Achatom, for the starting from the Chet of Marishan, is to be mechaber Hayalma, which is Makom and Zman, to the Olam Lefnei HaBria. So, the question is, where do we see that? In the Bria today, there should be any Makom for Lefnei HaBria of a place without Makom. So, we know that the Aron didn't fit into the Kodesh Kodashim. The Aron with the bottom, I don't remember the exact measurements, the Aron with the bottom took up more space than there was in the Kodesh Kodashim. So it was standing there al pines. So showing you that since that was the Aron HaKodesh was a Makom of Kodesh Kodashim, and the Makom of Kodesh Kodashim is perhaps the highest madrega to reach in Hayalma is a Makom that is B'li Makom, doesn't take up space. So that's why it's showing you that the Aron in the Kodesh Kodashim was such a pchina that it was taking up space without taking up space. And you see it also by Yaakov Avinu. What happened? Vayifka b'makom, vayolin sham, and there was over there, he took me Avnei HaMakom, and the Avnei HaMakom was 12 Avnei HaMakom, and they all became one. So theoretically, if you take 12 stones and you put them into one, so you get a huge, tremendous rock, right? But he laid his head on it, so it couldn't have been so big. It had to be a regular size. So that was a tzimtzum hamakom. So it was like a makom tzimtzum, was again enough of pchina that you see that in High Alma there's a way of having a thing that technically speaking takes up space, and it doesn't take up space. You see it also. You see in the Nes, in the Azara, when the Klal Yisrael came to the Azara, and they had to do Kairim in the Azara, there wasn't enough room. So what was the Nes? The Nes was that it didn't take up any more room. What was the Pshat? It was the same mahalach. That since it was a Makom, there's a time of Anya Kippur when everyone's getting a kapara, and then they misakin Hayalma, they're going to a space where there is no musag of makom. I mean, it still took up some space, but there was no boundaries. Because if you think about it, what was the vart of Lifnei HaBria? The vart of Lifnei HaBria was there was no boundaries, there was no din. Where did din come from? Din came from Bina. What happened by Bina was the creation of boundaries, which is Hayalma. Whether it be Zman as boundaries, or Makom, you have four walls, there's always boundaries. We take up space, as much space as we take up. So that's a boundary. You see also that that by Mitzrayim, what's Mitzrayim? Mitzrayim was considered the ultimate, what do I say, anti-Rebbeinu Shalom. Because what's the Taish Mitzrayim? Mitzrayim means boundaries. Since we want to be Mesak in the world, and the way to make the proper tikkun is Lifnei Habriya, and so since Mitzrayim was the vart was to create boundaries, that was Mitzrayim, which is Meitzay Yam, which is boundaries, just like the Yam is boundaries. So their whole mahus was to have boundaries, which was to be Eiker, the Sheirish of the Rebbeinu Shalom. You see, also, what was Shviras HaKelim? We're learning about Shviras HaKelim now. What happened by Shviras HaKelim? A Kli, even though everything is obviously totally ruchni, but the Kelim that were masig, right? Because we can't be masig otherwise, really. I think you asked me about that. Like, what's a Keli? If we're talking totally ruchni, what's Shviras HaKelim? So you make a picture in your head. There's a cup and you filled it up with too much eretz, so the Kli broke and. What's the pshat? The Shviras HaKelim is pshat that we want those eretz to go back up to our makom of Lifnei Habriya. And what happens after Shviras HaKelim is the tikkun. Where does it go back up to? It goes back up from Bria. It's supposed to go back up to Atzilus. Atzilus is not mamish Lifnei Habriya, but Atzilus is a place, b'li makom b'li zman. Right? So that's the tikkun that we're trying to get. Mitzrayim was the ultimate against it. And we see also that since Mitzrayim was against it, Sa'agu'ula from Mitzrayim was here to create that tikkun of restoring that Ein Sofius into our daily lives. And where do you see it from? You see it when we say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. How do you see that? Because Shem Havaya is what? Haya Hava V'yiyah. So the point is, you're starting off Lifnei Habriya, then there's the Hava, and the Haya was Lifnei Habriya. Haive is Hayalma. And the Yiyah is La'asud Lavai, which will be the same as Lifnei Habriya. So you see, when you say Shem Havaya, so that's a merumas and to be Musak and things Lifnei Habriya. What comes after the Shem Havaya and Shema Yisrael is Elokeinu. Elokeinu is Shem Elokim. So you're being Mechaber the Lifnei Habriya to the La'acha Habriya, which is Hayalma. How do you see that it's a chibur, that we're going back to the beginning? Because in Karbonis, what do you say right after Shema Yisrael? Atahu mishanivra ha'olam, right? Atahu mishaloi nivra ha'olam, from before the Bria. So there you see that there's a chibur direct from the Shem Havaya, Shem Elokeinu, giving you a remes what's supposed to be. That we're supposed to be mechaber the olam lifnei Abriya to the olam hazeh. You also see that in the Bria itself, the Shem Havaya didn't come in the Bria till afterwards, right? There was Lamed Bais Elikims before you came one time Shem Havaya. So the Shem Havaya came La'acha Bria, because the Bria of Hayalma stands on its own, and then our job is to be Mechaber, the Lifnei Bria to the Bria. Obviously not the whole thing, we can't do that, but to be Mesak and certain elements to it. You see also what is Shabbos is Me'en Olam Haba. So Shabbos also has that ability to be Mechaber the Bria to Lifnei Habriya, or we'll call it L'Asad Lavai. That Shabbos is called a Nachla B'li Mitzarim. It's also called Me'en Olam Haba. So by us being Shomer Shabbos, right? So we're able to reach a Madrega, even if we don't feel it, but we're able to reach a madrega of Kaidem Habriya. And that's Pshat Shabbos Menucha, that there's no achizas chitzainim. There's no achizas chitzainim in the Shabbos Lifnei Habriya. That's why, and I mean, there is some, obviously, because we're not on the madrega, but if we would be on the end of madrega, then we would be able to basically inherit it as a nachala. I'm saying, as the word nachala is B'li Mitzarim, which will be mamish pure. So that the word of the Mishkan was to show us that how the Elyonim came down to the Tachtainim, and our job is to be mechaber the Tachtainim of the Mishkan to the Kedusha of Kodesh Kadashim and the Aron HaKodesh with the Elyonim, which is the Makom Lefnei Habriya. How does the Parshas Tetzaveh start out? start off? It starts off, Kach L'cha Shemen Zay Zach Lamor. It's the first thing. So they all say, what's the kesher between Shem? Here the Pasha is going to be talking about the big day Kohen Gadol, and we're coming off Klei HaMishkan. Where does this come in? So as you know, that the word Zach is 27, and the Olam of Hayalma was created with 27 Oisias. It's the Chaf Beis Oisias plus the Matzbach. So you have now Chaf Zayin Oisias. Oisias etzim represent Hayalma, because Lufnei Habriya there was no Oisias, right? As you know, that the Chachma, the Gailam, the Yud HaGailam came with Tzfiras HaChachma, right? So it was the first time that you had Chaf Zayin Oisias was with the Bria, and we want to show that this Ner, which is made from Shemen, Zay Zach, the Zach is Beli Zach. There's no Shmarim, there's no Chitzainim. How do you reach Shas Madrega? Again, it's a chibur of the Elyonim with the Tachtainim. The Chav Zayin Oisi is the Tachtainim, and the Zachos, where there's no Achizas Chitzainim, is the Elyonim. Which also you see, Ner is, as you know, is Rosh Tevis Nefesh Ruach. Ruach is from the Elyonim, Nefesh is from the Tachtainim, which is why also when we light candles for Shabbos, we light Dafka a Ner Shel Shabbos, which you see that has a Koyach to be Mechabed the Elyon and the Tachtain. Also, just as an Agav de Kazach, it's also, you see by Havdalah, just throwing this in, I said this over before, that Ner Shabbos is a quiet, Shabbos Menucha. It sits quietly on the wick, doesn't blow, doesn't move. You make Havdalah, you have an Avuk, it's jumping up and down, it's showing you that it is Ratzei V'Shoev, you're running back and forth to make money or to bring your kids to day school, or I should say Mora, not day school, but whatever it is. I'm just saying, so it's always, the whole life is Ratzei V'Shoev. See, the Kohen Gadol, when he went to the Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash, on Yom Kippur, he went to the Kodesh Kodashim, was also Ratzei V'Shoev is running in and out of Kodesh Kodashim. Why was he doing that? To be Mesakin, that we should no longer have to do Ratzei V'Shoev, and we should be able to be Menucha. And that's why Shabbos Menucha, and that's why you have a Ner, and that's why we have the Zach of the Shemen. It should be a Zakus, that it should be able to have the ability to be Mekasha, Al Yanim and Tachtainim.